My name is Marlene, and I'm so excited to be with you today. My talk is going to be on Python and creativity. And this is going to be sort of an exploratory guide on just these two topics. I really love speaking about Python, and I am a big part of the Python community is a big part of my life. I love Python. And I'm also going to be speaking about creativity. I love sort of making things and building things. And so with Python, I think those two things together make a really cool combination. And so that's what I'm going to be speaking on today. So just before we get started, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself. Like what was mentioned before, I am from Harare, Zimbabwe. Right now, I'm in a different country. I'm in Ireland right now, but I am based most of the year in Zimbabwe. And I really love Zimbabwe. It's a country in the southern part of Africa. It's just above South Africa. And I've lived there for most of my life. It's very sunny. So if you're ever looking for a place to vacation or something like that, Zimbabwe is definitely a place that you should consider. Something else about me is that I am the co-founder of an organization called ZimboPy, and ZimboPy is a nonprofit organization that tries to get Zimbabwean girls excited about computer science, and obviously specifically because I like Python, specifically Python is what we try to get them excited about. I'm also a developer advocate at Voltron Data, so I have been working there for the past few months. I joined last year in November. I work remotely, so I'm based in Zimbabwe, but I work for a company that's in the US, and that's been a really cool experience, working remotely. And then a final thing about me is that I am the vice chair of the Python Software Foundation. And if anyone hasn't heard of the PSF, it's the nonprofit behind the Python programming language. And I think the PSF does a great job. I'm actually the outgoing vice chair. So this is actually my last few days on the board of directors. But I'm very excited to see the new board kind of step in and do the work there as well. So before I get started as well, if you would like to follow me on Twitter, my handle is Marlene_ZW, or you can visit my website, which is just marlenemhangami.com as well. So feel free to tweet at me if you enjoy this talk or want to ask me questions or things like that. I love talking to people. So today, like I mentioned before, I'm speaking to you about Python and creativity. And one of the reasons why I chose to speak about creativity is because I was recently reading a book. I have the book somewhere, but it's a book by a guy called Austin Kleon. And it's a book that kind of talks about, the title of the book is How to Steal Like an Artist. And it kind of walks people through this idea that we need to be creative in the digital age. One of the ways we can be creative is to take or to take the work of other people and build upon that work and also give those people credit. So the title of the book isn't the best, because I know that hopefully most of us know that stealing is not a good thing in normal life. But in this book, the author does a really good job of kind of trying to get a point across that when we are trying to build something new from scratch, it's really hard if we're just starting from zero. But if we're collaborating with other people or taking other people's work and then building on that work, then we are able to build more creatively in the things that we do. And so while this book was it was mainly written by an author who's a writer and an artist, when I was reading the book, I thought there were so many themes and so many sort of main points and insights that I see happening really naturally in the Python and open source community around the world, which I really loved. And so I thought I would kind of talk about creativity and how I see it merging with the Python community as well, and give him credit too. So this is one of the quotes on the screen that was in the book, which is Artist Theft, and that was a quote that Pablo Picasso said. So let's go ahead and move forward. So for me, I don't know about you, but for me, as I have started working remotely, and as we have also moved into this pandemic, and a lot of the things that have happened are now happening online. So like this conference, for example, I would have loved to be in Colombia in person, but unfortunately I'm having to kind of call in and be there virtually, which is also great because more people can join. But at the same time, it is also a bit sad that I couldn't actually be there in person, and I do plan to do that in the future. And so some of those things, I think for me, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, I started to feel that I wasn't feeling as excited about the work I was doing with Python. And previously, before I moved to Voltron Data, I was working as a software engineer with NVIDIA, and I was working purely on software engineering and just sort of Python programming there, and was enjoying that work. But I think because it was remote, because there were no conferences that I was able to go to in person and meet people and talk to people one-on-one, I started to not feel as excited about my work. And I really wanted to start to be intentional about being creative in the work that I did. And so I ended up switching to developer advocacy and moving to Voltron Data, and decided that in the work that I did there, I wanted to be very creative. And as I started to do that, I started to feel a sense of joy. And I love this quote that's on the screen. It's by a guy called Wayne Bullock, who's an American photographer. And it says, "Creativity is an ode to life. It is not a form of entertainment. It is a form of joy." And I felt, even as I've become a bit more creative in the work that I've done with Python, or making sure that I'm trying to approach problems in a more creative way, that I felt a lot more joy in my engineering work as well. And so hopefully, as I walk you through this talk today, you will kind of also be able to experience that same joy too. So as we go on this journey to explore creativity, we're going to be examining three main things. The first thing is how to begin to be creative in our work. How do we start to get creative in the first place? The second thing is how to grow our creativity. So making sure that we are being consistent in the work that we do, and growing our creativity and expanding the capacity that we have. And then the third thing is how do we sustain our creativity? I think it's really easy sometimes to just get started with something for a little bit and then kind of let that taper off. But then it's also really important to begin to also make sure that you are sustaining that creativity over the long run. So these are the three things we're going to be looking at today. So the first thing that I want to share about a bit is inspiration, how we begin to be creative. And I think inspiration is a big, big part of that. So here on the screen, actually, we have a scene this is actually a scene I found on YouTube, and this is some people watching a sports game. I think they were watching like a soccer match or something in the UK, and then someone scored a goal, and then the people reacted in this way. And this is not a scene that just happens in the United Kingdom, or, I've seen this happening a lot in Zimbabwe, and I assume that maybe it happens in Colombia too as well. But if people are watching sports, they get really excited for some reason. I'm not really sure. And I think a good question to ask is exactly what is going on when people are this excited. And a few years ago, the New York Times published an article. It was titled "Sports Psychology, It Isn't Just a Game." And while obviously most sports are in the literally a game, but in the emotional sense, they found that when people were watching sports, they would be so emotionally involved that it didn't feel like a game anymore. So some of the researchers that the article interviewed found that many fans became so tied to the teams that they were watching that they experienced the same hormonal changes and other psychological changes watching the players that were playing in the game just as much as the athletes playing in the game did as well. So in the whole idea there is that these players, even just watching a game, you would feel and your body would sense or create certain hormones as though you were playing in the game just like one of the professional players. So this guy, a professor from Georgia State University, was quoted as saying, "The results suggest fans empathize with the competitors to such a degree that they mentally project themselves into the game and experience the same hormonal surges the athletes do." And so for me, I love this idea that we as humans can actually sort of transcend space and time by intentionally watching someone and feeling inspired by them to the extent where our body actually feels like it's in the game with them, which is one of the reasons why I think whenever I have brothers and whenever they watch some sort of a game or something like that, they always, like if they watch boxing or something, they will kind of come out of that and start punching the air and pretending like, they're the boxers themselves and saying stuff like if they were only given a chance, they could beat everyone, when it's actually not true. But they just having that inspiration and feeling like, okay, I can do that too, is a big part of that sort of phenomenon that I was talking about. So how does this apply to us as Python programmers or as software engineers? And I think for anyone that is in their work as a Python programmer and you're maybe struggling to feel inspired by the work that you're doing, or you're struggling to feel creative in your day-to-day work, I think the first step to do is to start to look for inspiration, intentionally look for that inspiration. And it's amazing because Python is an open source language. And so it's built around this whole philosophy that we should be open and we should share our code. We should share the work that we're doing so that other people can build on it and also collaborate with us in that work. And for me, when I first started to try to do this, when I first joined as a developer advocate and I was trying to figure out, okay, what are creative things that I can do with Python and how can I be a bit more creative in my work, I decided to go to the place where you should go to if you need some inspiration, which is GitHub. I think that's a great starting point. And I looked at GitHub and typed in Python, and millions of projects came up. And you don't just have to type in Python, you can also like typing something else, like maybe Python and web or Python and machine learning. And hopefully you'll be able to have access to all of these projects that can be a good place for you to feel inspired by the code that you're seeing. And another place that I have personally also found inspiration is through a company called Hugging Face. So I'm not sure how many of you have heard of Hugging Face, but they're a company that they focus, I think, particularly on machine learning and AI, but they have something called Spaces. And in Spaces, people can upload projects, different machine learning related projects that are written in Python. Most of them, I think, are written in Python. And you can sort of play around code. And one of the projects that I found was this one, which is a very cool animation that allows you to upload a video of yourself or take a video with your webcam and then change that video into an animation. And one of the reasons why I really loved this was because I know for me, growing up, I would watch Disney, and I love Disney. I'm not sure about you, but I love all of the Disney movies. I think they're great. But as I was watching Disney growing up, I would always feel like, okay, there are no characters in Disney that actually look like me. All of them are great, but I don't have Rapunzel's blonde, long hair, or I don't look like Cinderella or, whoever else. And so that was something that was kind of, it would have been nice to have some African princesses or things like that to look up to as well. And so through projects like this, when I saw this project, I was really inspired that, okay, wow, now there are so many things that I can do. Maybe I can even create a whole animation series myself with this Python code here on this space. So that was some place that I started to see when I was looking for inspiration. That was another place where I went and I found this awesome project. And so the next step for me when I do find something that I'm inspired by is to reverse engineer it and to dig into the code. And, I think it's one thing to just look at a project and think, oh, wow, that's cool. And I wish I could do that. Or I think that's very helpful. But a great thing to do as well, if you want to grow in your own creativity, is to be curious about the code itself and how things work. And so I remember when I was looking at the Hugging Face space, I went in and I downloaded all of the code is available on GitHub. So I went and I downloaded the code and made it work in my terminal, which was very intimidating and at first a bit confusing, but made it work in my terminal and was able to run it and get it to work in my own terminal in VS Code. And, some of the things I think when I was wanting to start to kind of play around with this code in my own terminal, I was a bit nervous because I'd never worked with GANs. So this is like a sort of machine learning project that works with GANs, and it also runs on a GPU. So I didn't have a laptop at the time. I wasn't using a laptop with a GPU, so I wanted to use a CPU, and I wanted to use it on my own laptop and not deploy to Hugging Face. And I felt like at first I was a bit intimidated, but I decided to do it anyway because one of the quotes from the book that I mentioned earlier on is, "Don't do what you know, do what you like." Because if you only just stick to the things that you know, then you're not going to be pushing yourself as much as you can to be able to grow and to be able to try new things that hopefully will make you a better programmer, a better software engineer in general. And so for me, one of the things that I thought about was that, okay, no, I really like this project and I really feel inspired to write code with this work. And so I don't want to just like look at it and be intimidated by the fact that, maybe I don't know everything about it, but to be able to work on it as well and not be afraid of that. And so that leads me to my second point, which is, like I mentioned, we need to be growing in our creativity. And one of the ways that we can do that is to push the boundaries of the work that we're doing. And so this quote on the screen is from a guy, I forget his name, but he is, I think, the creator of the principle of creative limitations. And it says, talent is like a muscle. Without something to push against, it atrophies. So we deliberately put obstacles in our path, barriers that will inspire us. And so what this means is just in the same way that if you are someone who enjoys exercising, I personally don't love going to the gym. I don't love exercising, but I know it's sometimes good for me. And I know that oftentimes if I'm not consistently pushing myself to get better, or if I'm not consistently working out or going to the gym or something like that, then it gets harder to actually start going to the gym or to start working out every time I stop. But if I'm consistently pushing myself to do more, then ultimately I end up being a bit more excited in the work that I do. And in terms of working out, whether that's running or whatever it is. And I think the same thing is true for us as Python programmers, because Python isn't just one specific field. So it's not just machine learning. It's not just web development. It's not just data science or, whichever other field you're interested in. But Python, the good thing about Python is it has a range of things that we can do with it, whether that's creating libraries or creating packages, doing data analysis or working with databases, software engineering, and things like that. And one of my favorite things about Python is that it does allow us to have such a great range of things that we can do with it, which is awesome. So I would definitely encourage you, if you are someone who is into a specific field of Python, maybe you've only just been working as an engineer, I would encourage you to be curious about what does machine learning do, or if you're a web developer, be curious about databases and things like that. And ultimately, that will hopefully lead you to be more creative in the work that you do. And so it isn't just Python, I think, that is out there, and it isn't just just dabbling in different topics and fields. There's so much out there in terms of how you can be creative with the code that you write, whether that's trying out a new framework or collaborating with other people to do something cool with the code that you're writing. There's so many ways that you can be creative in the work that you do. And I think definitely, like I said before, collaboration and working with other people is another way that we can even supercharge that and make it so that we are really like doing creative work in a way that's impactful to the community. So I don't think it's just about creating anything that seems cool, but also it can be good to specifically try to create things that solve a specific problem and to come together with other people who are also interested in solving those problems. And I think that's how some of the best open source projects have been created in the past. And I think a good example of this is actually, I mentioned earlier that I work for Voltron Data, and one of the co-founders of Voltron Data is Wes McKinney. And Wes McKinney is also the creator of Pandas. And at some point in 2017, he published this article. It's titled Apache Arrow and the 10 Things I Hate About Pandas. And so obviously there's the sad panda because its own creator is saying he has 10 things that he hates about it. And I love pandas, by the way. And if you've used pandas, if you do data science or anything related to data in Python, then you've probably used pandas before. But I think Wiz, when he was working with pandas, he was getting a lot of feedback from users or also experimenting with things, and saw that there were issues with the library that people kept running up into. And instead of just saying, what more do you want from me? I created pandas or something like that. Instead of just assuming that people, should just keep pandas as it is, he decided to go ahead and try to find a solution for the problems that he came against. And not only did he decide to come up with a solution to this problem by himself, he got together a group of different people, and not just people from the Python ecosystem, but people from R, people from the C community, people from Java. And these were people that had also been working with databases and other sort of, tabular data in their own languages. And they had also been running into similar issues, particularly with big data, whenever they were working with tabular data. And so they all came together and decided to collaborate and figure out a solution in terms of how to fix the problems that Wes had seen in pandas and these other people had seen in their own languages. And I think that's an amazing part of creativity as well, when we come together to solve a problem. So we're not just thinking, okay, maybe I can solve a problem by myself from scratch, but also collaborating and kind of working and building off of each other's ideas to create solutions for the problems that we were facing. And so at the end of this, they created something called Apache Arrow. So this talk isn't about Apache Arrow. It's a talk about, this is a talk about creativity. So I won't really go into exactly what Apache Arrow is, but it's it's a memory framework. It's a columnar memory format. And if you want to know a bit more about what they came up with, you can go ahead and watch my talk. I have an introduction to Apache Arrow for Python programmers on YouTube if you'd like to watch that. But just generally, I think that it's such an inspiring story to be able to see that people, even from different languages, can come together and create things as a community as well. So the third and final thing that I am going to speak to you about today is about how to sustain our creativity. And I know for myself, the two important things that have helped me sustain my creativity are rest and community. Those two things have been the main ways that I've been able to sustain my creativity. And so there have been several things that I have done personally if I am feeling burnt out. So oftentimes we, especially these days when, you know, most people, because we have social media, and one of the ways that you can advance your career is through social media and posting very frequently. And though that's a good thing, it's very easy because people are always looking for content, and there's also always a pressure to be producing, whether that's code, new code bases, new content for a platform or anything like that. It's very easy for us to get burned out. And I found for myself, when I first started working as a developer advocate, I actually got to a place where I started to feel burnt out myself. And I had started off thinking I was going to do everything. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start a YouTube channel. I'm going to create a podcast. I'm going to, I don't know, do everything possible. But I started even just doing Twitter and just trying to work on code with Apache Arrow. And even that was a lot for me. So I said, okay, no, I need to be a bit more, I need to pace myself a bit more, and also started doing a few things that I felt also helped me feel a bit more grounded and kind of led into a routine for my day that would help me feel calm and make it feel like I can get through my day and do the things that I need to do in a way that doesn't make me feel rushed or that I need to overwork or something. So several things that have worked for me, just as advice if anyone would like it. The first is I really enjoy sitting in the sun, and in the mornings, just taking a couple of minutes in the day to go, I usually go and sit in the sun and journal. I found that is really helpful for my mood. And I think there's research that shows if you sit in the sun for certain times, for a certain amount of time in the earlier hours of the day, that it'll help to regulate your mood. So that's a big one. I think the second thing as well is spending some time in nature. Because we're computer programmers, we can sometimes end up just on our computer all of the time. And it's even worse these days because things are so virtual. And so we end up just kind of speaking to a computer all the day, all the time, every day. But really remembering to make sure to spend some time in nature and to take a break from your computer, because during those times as well is when you can get a few more creative ideas and your brain kind of has time to rest and connect different nerves to be able to remember things. So I think that's a really important thing in terms of spending some time in nature as well. And then, and like I said as well, one of the things that helps me feel motivated to continue to be creative is getting support from the community around me and to have community cheering me on. So, you know, a good example of this for me is that, you know, when I mentioned earlier that I had wanted to be a bit more creative in my work and a bit more intentional in terms of sharing that creativity in my role. And so one of the things I committed to doing was to sharing pretty regularly. At first I was like, I need to do every day. I'm going to try and share something every day on Twitter about Python and a cool Python project or some cool Python code or something like that that I found on GitHub, and share that with the community around me. And that definitely did not last for the everyday thing. but I have tried to be consistent in terms of sharing as often as I can. And I've been really surprised by the feedback and the response to that. And, you know, some of my tweets have, usually my tweets will get like 5 likes. Okay, not 5 likes, but not many likes. And on some of these posts, it's gotten like thousands of likes, which has been very cool to see. And I think for me as well, being able to have proof through a platform like Twitter to be able to see, okay, people actually really like the things that I'm sharing or find them useful and helpful is another way that I feel inspired and encouraged. Because I can see that people find value in the things that I'm sharing. And so I would definitely encourage you, if you are someone that does need inspiration for being more creative with your Python code, to look for projects or to work on things and then also share them publicly, because knowing that people can benefit from your code is also another way to sustain that creativity, I think, as well. So that is actually all that I have for you today. If you would like to reach out to me, feel free to visit my website. It's just marlenemhangami.com. Or you can contact me at Marlene at voltrondata.com, or tweet at me, Marlene_ZW. But thank you so much for listening. I hope this talk was helpful to you. And yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.